In this video, we are going to discuss about how to create databases using forward engineering in the previously created ER diagram. That means the earlier shoe center ER diagram or ER model, SQL model, and how to write insert query statements required to insert data into user tables. So in this video, we are going to discuss to forward engineer our ER diagrams, forward engineer our tables from the ER diagram to a database where we can insert data and edit data or update or delete data. So there are some changes to be made according to the here. I here in the previous video I created a many to many relationship between user and user type. I created a non identifying relationship, many to many relationship between user and user type. Generally, that is the relationship format for user and user type if we take the general scenario. But according to the requirement of the earlier shoe center, this is no more a many to many relationship. Because in earlier shoe center they have required a one-to-many relationship. That means a customer can have only one type, user type. He or she must be a employee or as a supplier or as a customer. A user can't be at a time, he or she can't be a customer or supplier or a employee at a time, or in this software a user can't be all three types. So there's a one to many relationship. A user in a user type there can be many users, but a user only can have one type. So there's a non-identifying one. I will build a non-identifying one to many relationship. So here the many side is user and the one side is user type. So here I have created a one-to-many relationship between user type and user. So there is also another change to be made, a mistake that is made by me between the relationship between invoice item and stock. Previously I mentioned a one-to-many relationship where the invoice item the stock was the many side and the invoice item was in the one side, but I realized my mistake. The correct relationship between the invoice item and stock is one to many relationship where the many side is invoice and the one side is stock. Now the relationship between invoice item and stock is also created. Previously I mentioned the many side as stock and the one side as invoice item, so that was the mistake. Then all set to forward engineer my this ER diagram or the SQL model. So we will forward engineer it. I will select database, forward engineer. Just click next to all the tabs that appear here. The forward engineer finished successfully. So we will open our Heidi SQL and see whether the forward engineer is successfully done. So here I will type my password, the database connection password. So here the earlier shoe center database is created with the table address, brand, city, gender, GRN item, invoice item, product, stock, system login, user and user type. I think with the relevant item, relevant relationship, the tables has been created. We'll see the user here. The relationship also created successfully in our database. So we will move on to the requirements and fulfill it. So requirement number 1, enter the data into the user type table. So we will enter the data to user type table. So here the user type, I need to enter insert into. So here we must write the query statement, insert into users type, user type, user type, and the I have to mention the column name, user I think what is user type name, no? User type name, and we must mention the values. So this is the insert query, insert into the table. Here I have selected my database, so I no need to mention the database name. So here I will directly, this is my table name, so I will mention within the gray version. So insert into user type, where the columns that must be inserted is user type name, and we must mention values. We must mention what are the values insert that must be inserted into user type name. So we will see what are the values. Employee, we no need to mention the id because uh, uh, it's an auto increment, no, so we no need to mention that. Employee, so we will execute this and see whether our, now in the data side we will see whether the user type name employee has been entered. Likewise we will enter all other user type name also. Here I have entered all the related data to the user type table. Now we will move on to our next requirement. Enter the data of the table below in the city. That means we must enter the city name in the city table. So here I will edit this query statement, insert into city, insert into, here I will edit as city, here city name, values must be, first value must be Colombo. Now we will execute this query and see whether the data is added to the city table. The data is added to the city table. Now we add the rest of the data. Likewise we will add the rest of the data also. We have added the rest of the data that related to our city table. Now we will move on to our next requirement. The next requirement is enter the data in the table below into the gender table. So we need to enter the gender table's gender name. So here I will update my query. The table is gender and the column is gender name and the value is male and female. First I will enter male and then female. we'll see the gender table whether the data has been added. The gender tables data is also been added. Now we'll move on to our next requirement. Enter the data in the table below into the user table. So here we need to enter the user tables data. First name Thilan, last name Tennakon, contact no, the relevant contact no, status 1, user type ID 1, address ID 1, gender ID 1. So we will enter this query also. Here we need to edit this into user, where there must be the first name and then the last name and then the contact no, and then the status after the status we need to mention our user type ID, I think so. Before that there must be a small changes made in our database. In the order of the column must be set, because in this user table the gender ID comes first, but the user type ID is in the last. Here I will put the user type ID first and then the user type ID, address ID, and then the gender ID. So now it's in the order. Now we will take the user type ID, here we need to arrange, we must synchronize our model. So first of all we will synchronize it. Here I have now arranged into the order like user type ID and the address ID and then the gender ID. Now I will synchronize, that means update my model, so the database also will be updated. Now we'll see the data. Now see the user type, address, gender. Now the database has been updated in the relevant order. Now we need to mention the column names. Before that we have mentioned the user type ID, so we will, I need to complete the address ID also, because if the address table is only completed we can fill the address ID here. So I am going to complete the address table first and then move on to the user table. So here I will open a new query tab. So here insert into address, the values are the address ID. We will see address table. We will see what are the columns. Address ID, we no need the address ID. First we need the number or the no column, and then we need the street 1 column, and then we need the street 2 column, and we need the city ID column, which is a foreign key, the relationship between the city and address table. So we will enter the values. So the value for no is this relevant value, comma, street 1. Here I have written the query statement to insert the values to the address table. We will execute this query and see. Yes, here there's a small mistake now. Okay. Now the value has been added to the address table. We will refresh it and see. The value table is added with the city ID candy 2. Now we will likewise we will add the rest of the addresses. Here I have mentioned all the address with the relevant city ID and the address ID. So we will now complete the user table, because the gender table is also completed, the city table is also, the user type table is also completed. Now we can complete our user table. So here we must mention the user type ID, so here I will break this query from here. User type ID and the address ID. Next we need the address ID. Next we need the address ID, and then we need the gender ID. Now we need to fill our values accordingly. So the first name is Dylan, and the last name is Tenacon, and the contact information or the contact no and then the relevant IDs of this user type, address ID and gender ID. So we need to give the relevant ID number because the data type is int. Here we now need to mention the ID number within the the single quotation. So here the ID numbers are we need first of all we need to mention the status also. Status is 1 and then the ID number. So the ID numbers are 2 2 no 1 1 1. The ID numbers are 1 comma 1 comma 1. So we will execute this. There's a small mistake. 1. Now the data, I think the data must be here. Now the data is added to the user table with the user type employee, address number 52 and the gender is male. So here we will likewise add the other data also to our user table. I have added insert all users data to the user table. Now we will move on to our next requirement. Our next requirement is to enter the data in the system login table. Here we need to enter the data in the system login table. So here for all the tables I used insert query method. Now I will use the graphical method to enter the data to the system login table. So here the username is Thilan and the password is this relevant password and the user ID is Thilan 1. I will add this the next record or the data likewise. The second user name is Amanda and the password is Amanda's the relevant password and the user ID is 6. Now I have added added the relevant data into the system login table also. That's all for this video. Thank you. Have a nice day.